budget quest. I want to note that there will be no disruptions allowed during the meeting. That includes disruptive noises and gestures that impede this committee's work. We're going to begin. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Yaroslavsky.
Here.
Blumenfield.
Present.
Hutt. Here. McCosker. Absent. Hernandez.
Present.
4 members present and a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we have 58 items on the agenda, including 32 closed session items. I would like to hear item 1 and 22 in open session, and I have some short amendments to item 15. I believe that there's a CLA amendment as well, which the clerk will read. We're going to continue item 8 until our June 17th meeting after it's heard in Transportation Committee. For item 1, I have questions for the CAO, Personnel, and City Attorney's Office. Colleagues, are there other departments you have specific questions for? Because otherwise I'd like to release the remaining departments so they can get back to work. Councilmember Blumenfield.
I'd like to add BOE.
BOE. Okay. Councilwoman Hernandez, are there other departments you want to ask to stay for questions on the FSR? Okay. Councilwoman Hutt, I can't see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on item 22, when
Just
we
on
get there,
22?
City Attorney.
City Attorney. Okay.
Chairwoman, I would like to call item 11 special for a separate vote.
11. Okay. Okay. So colleagues, I recommend approving the following other items on consent, which are 2 through 7, 9 and 10, 12 through 14, 16 through 21, and 23. Are there any of those items that you'd like to pull from consent? Okay. We're going to move now to public comment. Mr. Whitley, would you please read instructions on how to give public comment for today's meeting?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. To people providing public comment, you will have 1 minute for comment for all agenda items you wish to comment on. When it is your turn to speak at the podium, please state which of the agenda items you'd like to speak on. Members of the public may also speak for up to 1 minute on general public comment. During general public comment, members of the public may speak to any item within the subject matter of this committee, which generally concerns the city's budget, finances, and contracts. We will tell you when your time is up. When speaking on the agenda items, you must be on topic. Our goal is to get through as many speakers as we can. If you are not on topic, or if we cannot tell whether you are on topic, you will get 1 brief warning from me or the chair. At that point, you need to immediately and clearly return to topic. If you do not do so, or if you again stray, you will forfeit the rest of your speaking time, and we will move on to the next speaker. Please call the speakers.
Okay, thank you very much. When I call your name, please come up to the podium. Doug Dimmadome, Karen Peterson, Audit LA, Derek Shawan, Henri, and Scientology Sergeant.
Yes, hi. I'd like all agenda items and general public comment, please.
Go ahead.
So there's several motions here that discuss the upcoming financial status report for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. And I have an update on what's going on with the federal Judge Carter case. Interestingly enough, some of the council members present here today were brought up in the testimony that CAO Matthew Zabel gave out. Blumenfield particularly, I don't know why you were a fan favorite, but he was talking about the issues of the budget not being able to be reconciled, not being able to be resolved, and essentially admitting that the homelessness programs they have to do with all these grants, that some were taken on consent, some were not, were actually ill-defined in the settlement agreement. There was no definition whatsoever on what it meant to create a new bed. There's no definition on what it meant to remove an encampment or a shelter or RV or destroy a RV. There was no definition as to what performance measures would actually be measured on what a meaningful and significant reduction in unsheltered and or homelessness overall, period, point blank, meant. And so what that tells me is that in every single one of these items, there is zero confidence that anybody should have that that money will actually be going towards any sort of effective, legitimate, and practical use. It will never see the light of day to the people that need it. And the testimony that Szabo gave as well, again, mentioned here as some of the motions on the CAO's office were specific to the fact that the deputies working under him and the mayor's office more broadly testified that they knew that these definitions were non-existent. They knew there was active, deliberate, intentional collusion, corruption, and destruction of the public funds for lining the pockets of private entities. And Judge Carter is absolutely sickened by what's going on in the city. Judge Carter is not having any of it, and neither are the public that are attending those meetings. And so in all of these agenda items that have to do with any sort of grants, any sort of financial resolutions, you cannot resolve a budget where you're burning billions of dollars, but the $2 billion isn't really the issue. It's the long-term 55-plus year contracts that Szabo admitted that Blumenfield and all the other council members knew. The delta in the interest rates and how the lack of the definition of the interest rate, if it's a fair market value or if it's just a made-up equation, that's the real money. We're talking about laundering trillions of dollars. The $2 billion is an absolute drop in the bucket. And all the testimony by Szabo and all the other folks have your names on them. They know, we know, that you guys knew of all this corruption and collusion, but the biggest gangster of all orchestrating this is none other than Heidi Feldstein Soto, because she was counseling the city and she refused to prosecute any of the developers that know that all this was going on, that knew all this fraud was happening, and she didn't prosecute any of it.
Good morning, Councilmember Nuri Martinez. How are you doing? Let's speak on all items and general public comment. Thank you, Nuri Martinez. Start with item number 5. Nuri is about the increased services for the emergency ambulance transport services. I am here to support you, Nuri, because we all Palestinian to begin with. I actually went to your neighborhood the other day. And then I was sitting in the sidewalk for 1 hour in your neighborhood. There are 7 ambulances pass by, which is very good, because that means there are ambulances going to your district, every hour. That's good. However, I want to ask you, Nuri, that why in my neighborhood, Figueroa and 77, I sit there for 1 hour, I see 0 ambulance going into our neighborhood. Why that you are putting all of the ambulance in your neighborhood and then nobody is saving our life in our Figueroa and 77 neighborhood? Now, let's move on to item number 13. It's about the homeless court program offered by the city attorney's homeless engagement services. Okay, Nuri Martinez, I'm here. I'm calling you that, first of all, telling me that which city attorney are actually doing some sort of a homeless engagement work. Because as far as I know, your city attorney gonna collect, I don't know, $200,000, $500,000, and then sitting there doing nothing. Just catch me. Sir, you are out of on topic. Your public comments period is done. Oh, get off the podium. That's all they do. And then somehow you are telling me that your city attorney is doing some homeless work. Good job, Nuri Martinez. Now, let's move on to item number 17. Item number 17 is some sort of sexual violence, domestic violence about law enforcement. Yes, I am here to support that, because there are so many people in our neighborhood. They are suffering from domestic violence. They are suffering from the sexual assault. But however, where is our LAPD officer? No idea, because when I go to your neighborhood and I see that your neighborhood, there are police cars going to your neighborhood, several 10 times per hour, 5 whatever per hour. But in our neighborhood, we see there's 0 police right there. Why is that?
Can I
I don't
ask-
know why you put all of the police in your neighborhood, but why there's no police in our neighborhood. Now let's move on to item number, let's say 2023. 23 is the LAPD overtime. Yes, thank you, Palestinian. Yes, about a police overtime. Yes, the other day I was speaking with Sergeant Duarte, and Sergeant Duarte told me that he's very frustrated. Sergeant Duarte said, I really want to work overtime on Figueroa. I really want to work overtime on Skid Row. I really want to work overtime on the most violent neighborhood in city of LA, but the LAPD does not allow them. Does not allow him. And then the city council does not allow the budget for him to work. So right now, we have all of those amazing LAPD officers like Sergeant Duarte. They want to take down the gang. They want to take down the sexual assault. They want to take down the rapist. They want to take down the shooter. But you are not allowing those officers to have enough overtime. Come on, man, Nuri.
Tough act to follow. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to speak on all items plus, but that's why I know, the 2 minutes and then it'll flip back to, all right. I want to talk on, all right, for the ambulance. I think it's really unfair that you guys are pushing fees onto the people. It's hard enough. So if somebody trips on your broken sidewalks, they have to pay extra to get to the hospital, okay? If the city's burning down due to, lack of good management, and people get smoke inhalation or any kind of injury, they have to pay more to get to the hospital. If people can't afford, fruit and vegetables and are eating too much ramen and have a blood pressure incident, they have to, pay extra for the hospital, to get to the hospital. You guys mismanage, whoever, the mayor, whoever you want to blame, mismanage things to the point where in $1 billion in a deficit, but you're trying to pass it on to us. Please stop doing that. Figure it out some other way. For the animals, yes, please give it free adoptions and free spay and neutering, okay? And as far as, the cannabis friends, you guys tax so much in that. Yes, they deserve breaks, okay? Because sometimes people may need to smoke a little something to deal with all the stress of living in this city. As far as the overtime, it's great that you want to make sure that these fine officers get their overtime. But what about the rest of the city workers? They just want their regular time. Are you going to make sure that they get their regular time? And as far as parking enforcement, the surplus, okay, I could tell you how you can make even more of a surplus. Put parking meters on L. Ron Hubbard Way. The city is lying to people saying it's a no parking street. They cannot prove it. Prove it to me, and I will never mention it again. If you can prove to me that L. Ron Hubbard is actually no parking, I'll never mention it again, I promise you. Till then, I'm going to keep mentioning it and put parking meters in. It just makes sense. And whatever else you're doing, just whatever, I'll let it roll over. Okay, here we go. So budget, I would love it if you'd put the budget, okay, for overtime to have, I would like all these officers, because we have a First Amendment protest coming up, legal, peaceful protest at Scientology about to stop family separation and to stop their ADA abuses. And, of course, they aren't happy with me. All of a sudden, I'm getting a lot of pre-planned funeral calls and all this stuff. And they're, whatever. They're trying to go after me in different ways, which is fine. I'm going to keep fighting for the victims of Scientology. But I wouldn't mind if all the officers here got overtime, paid overtime, to come and protect us and make sure we're safe from Scientology. Even though Jennifer Krauskopf, one of their very own, is working with us at this point. She is helping us, and I am appreciative of that, but that's only one person. We need to get other people to, realize that there is help out there, and we're here to help, but you guys should let them know that you're here to help. But thankfully, Jennifer Krauskopf is finally coming around. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it for public comment. We're going to close public comment unless anyone else hasn't had a chance to speak. Okay, we're ready to vote on the consent items, which again, colleagues, are 2 through 7, 9 and 10, 12 through 14, 16 through 21, and 23. I move approval on those items with the following instructions. Item 2, approve the CAO's recommendations. Item 3 and 4, approve Government Operations Committee reports, which were adopted this morning. Item 5, concur with the Public Safety Committee and request the city attorney to prepare a draft ordinance reflecting the proposed fee increases. Item 6, concur with the Government Operations Committee and approve the ordinance. Item 7, approve the controller recommendations. Items 9 and 10, concur with the APLCE Committee and approve the Board of Animal Services Commissioners' reports. Item 12, concur with the Public Safety Committee and approve the CAO recommendations. Item 13, concur with the Homelessness and Housing Committee and approve the CAO report dated April 21st, 2025, and note and file the City Attorney report dated August 15th, 2024. Item 14, concur with the APCLE Committee and approve the RAP Board's report recommendations. Items 16 and 17, concur with the Public Safety Committee and approve the CAO's recommendations. Items 18 and 19, concur with the Public Safety Committee and approve the CAO's Board of Fire Commissioners recommendation. Item 20, concur with the Transportation Committee and approve the CAO recommendations. Item 21, concur with the Transportation Committee and approve LADOT's recommendations. And item 23, approve the motion. Ms. Morales, would you please call the roll and tally the votes?
Yaroslavsky.
Yes.
Blumenfield.
Blumenfield, aye.
Hutt.
Yes.
McCosker, absent. Hernandez. 4 ayes, these items are approved as stated by the chair.
Thank you so much. We're going to move to item 11, which Councilwoman Hernandez called special for a separate vote. Colleagues, I recommend we concur with the Public Safety and Personnel and Hiring Committees and approve the CAO recommendations. Councilwoman Hernandez, do you want to speak to this or just vote separate? Okay, great. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yaroslavsky.
Yes.
Blumenfield.
Aye.
Hutt.
Yes.
McCosker, absent. Hernandez.
No.
3 ayes and 1 no. This item is approved.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, those items are approved. I'd like to take up item 15 next. I'm not requesting a presentation, or I don't have any questions, but have the following recommended amendments. So for item 15, I'm just going to read through the recommended amendments. 1, approve LADOT's recommendation number 1 in the LADOT report dated April 15th, 2025, to authorize the department to retroactively submit grant applications to the MAT Cycle 2 program for the 4 projects listed in the LADOT report. Number 2, delete recommendations numbers 2, 3, and 5 in the LADOT report. I recommend deleting these because it's asking for authority to execute agreements and fund positions. And given our fiscal state, I recommend the department come back and report on awards and advise on revised position needs before we approve new positions. 3, amend recommendation 4 as follows. Instruct LADOT and the CAO to report on the following prior to the acceptance of any grant awards: the projects that were awarded funding and additional resources needed, including staff and/or overtime funding for the successful implementation of the projects that were awarded, including staff at the Bureau of Engineering and Bureau of Contract Administration. The report should also discuss whether these are new position requests or if existing staff will be utilized. And this last instruction incorporates recommendations from the chair of T Committee on this item. Colleagues, do you have any questions? Okay. Great. Let's call the roll to approve this item as amended, please.
Yaroslavsky.
Yes?
Blumenfield.
Aye.
Hutt.
Yes.
McCosker, absent. Hernandez. 4 ayes, this item is approved as amended.
Great. Thank you, colleagues. We're going to move now to item 1. Mr. Wexler, would you please read the item?
Yes. Item 1. Item 1, City Administrative Officer Report relative to the 4th or year-end financial status report for fiscal year 24-25.
Great. So welcome to the table. To give a brief overview of the report. I understand also there are technical amendments from both the CAO and CLA. Will you each read these technical amendments into the record, starting with the CLA?
Thank you. The CLA amendment to the financial status report is to transfer $150,000 from the unappropriated balance fund number 100-58, account number 580439, 2025 windstorm and wildfire after action report, to council fund number 100-28, account number 003040, contractual services, for the chief legislative analyst to procure an outside entity to prepare a comprehensive independent after-action report regarding the January 2025 windstorm and wildfires pursuant to Council File 25-0006-S1. Thank you.
Great. And also from the CAO?
Yes, Madam Chair. We have a few. The first is to amend the second transaction for El Pueblo on page
I'm sorry,
1.
can you just bring that mic a little bit closer?
Sure thing.
Thank you.
The first amendment is to amend the second transaction for El Pueblo on page 1 of attachment 5 to revise the source accounts for the General Services Department appropriation within the El Pueblo de Los Angeles Historical Monument Revenue Fund, number 737/333, to transfer $180,000 from General Services Fund number 100/40, Salaries General Account number 001010, and $70,000 from General Services Fund number 100/40, Salaries as Needed Account number 001070, to properly align the appropriation reduction with available funding. The next is for leasing, to amend Recommendation 37 to add the following transaction as Recommendation 37F. This is to reappropriate up to $4,730,000 from the unencumbered balance available within leasing fund number 100/63, general fund leasing account number 000024, in the same amount and into the same account as exist on June 30th, 2025 for the completion of tenant improvements at 62330 Gramercy Avenue. And the final two are related to aging, relative to the Department of Aging's health insurance, counseling, and advocacy and CalFresh programs, in so much as these actions must take place before the close of the fiscal year to address current year expenditures. The first is to transfer $50,425 from the Department of Aging's health insurance, counseling, and advocacy program, fund number 47Y/02, account number 02A932, aging admin, future year, to the health insurance, counseling, and advocacy program, fund number 47Y/02, account number 02A102, aging, to cover the grant period from April 1st, 2024 through March 31st, 2025, and subsequently appropriate $50,425 therefrom to the Department of Aging Fund number 100/02, account number 001010, Salaries General. And the final amendment is to transfer $26,892 from the Department of Aging Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, Education Fund number 557E/02, account number 02W982, CalFresh Expense Admin, to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Education Fund number 57E/02, account number 02A102, aging, to cover the grant period ending September 30th, 2025, and subsequently appropriate $26,892 therefrom to the Department of Aging Fund number 100/02, account number 001010, Salaries General.
Is that it? Is there more?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Do you want to go ahead with a brief presentation and then we can jump into questions?
Oh, sure thing.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
My name is Nick Campbell with the Office of the CAO. I'm here to present the year-end FSR report. All right, year-end FSR, excuse me. This year, the city has had to make many difficult decisions to address fiscal challenges, which our office reported early in the year, which were only compounded by the windstorm and wildfire events in January. These decisions included significant appropriation reductions in the mid-year FSR, the deferral of interim budget requests, and the limiting of the use of the reserve fund only for settlements, judgments, and budget balancing. Further, as part of the 25-26 budget, the mayor and council made additional difficult decisions to make the necessary strides towards structural balance and rebuilding our reserves. The recommendations of this report are consistent with the assumptions of the 25-26 budget and will ensure we can close out this fiscal year in a position to implement the 25-26 budget next year, barring significant deviations in revenue or expenditures from the projections in this report. For our revenue, our April receipts are approximately $39 million below the revised plan for 24-25, which was updated concurrent with the 25-26 budget and represents a approximate $109 million downward revision from the 24-25 adopted revenue budget. However, after excluding interest earnings that may be owed to special funds and adjusting for $25.6 million in LA tax receipts not yet recorded in the financial management system, our April revenue is approximately $16 million below plan. Many of our receipts are near the revised plan and are on track to meet the revised estimates with minor variances. However, the most significant negative variances from the revised plan are in sales, transient occupancy, and documentary transfer tax, which may indicate a greater impact from current economic uncertainties and present a downside risk to year-end revenues from those sources. We do project that these negative variances may be offset by business tax receipts that are not yet recorded in our financial management system. We project that most departments will finish the year within budget or with year-end surpluses, mostly due to challenges in filling vacancies and additional savings identified since the mid-year FSR. In tables 2 and 3 on pages 10 and 13 respectively, we report a total remaining budget gap of $68.3 million, consisting of $51.7 million in projected overspending for departmental budgets and $16.6 million in overspending for non-departmental budgets and special funds. The recommendations of this report address $52.7 million of this overspending, and we identify anticipated future actions to address the remaining $15.6 million by year-end. The majority of the overspending is in the city clerk, fire, general services, and police departments, as well as the Human Resources Benefits Fund. The city clerk overspending is due to costs for the November 2024 election. The fire department overspending is due to unbudgeted costs associated with the impact of the new sworn labor agreements and with the response to the windstorm and wildfire events earlier this year. The GSD overspending is primarily due to increased fuel and energy costs and increased fleet maintenance costs. The police overspending is primarily due to salary costs associated with civilian and sworn labor agreements approved last year and the increased use of sworn and civilian overtime. And the human resources benefits overspending is due to higher benefits, premium costs, and workers' compensation benefits payments than assumed in the budget. For our reserves, our cumulative reserves are below our 10% policy target at 6.56%, with the reserve fund itself at 3.98% after accounting for the transactions approved since July 1 and the recommendations of this report. The recommendations and projections included in our report are consistent with the assumptions of the 25-26 budget related to the reserve fund and the anticipated July 1 balance. Additionally, we discussed 2 issues of concern that may affect our finances going forward. The first is the tentative agreement with the Fire Department Chief Officers Association, our MOU 22, which is pending council consideration, and the risks to the city associated with the Trump administration's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget, which proposes $552 billion in cuts to non-defense spending. For the remaining departmental budgets, as I mentioned earlier, most departments reported finishing the year within budget or with surplus funds. In some department narratives, we have also identified some additional issues of concern which may have impacts on those individual departments. Finally, we provide updates on the use of our American Rescue Plan Act funds as well as the state budget. I'm happy to answer any questions on this report, and there are other CEO analysts and representatives from these departments who are available to respond or should you have more specific questions.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, colleagues, and then I'll turn it over. Can you provide more details on the revised revenue estimates and projections going forward to 25-26? And specifically, are we still in line with the budget the council adopted for this upcoming fiscal year?
Hello, Melissa Krantz of the Office of the CAO. Right now, we have analyzed tentatively May receipts are still being recorded. Some of the downfalls that are reported in the year-end FSR have been recovered. So like our sales tax and dock tax are back on track. So there is no concern about that right now. TOT is still behind plan, and that's probably our greatest exposure. We are hoping that the business tax receipts, which are ahead of plan, will mean a higher base for next year, and there may be some variances within different resources, but that the total year-end receipts are still on track.
Okay, thank you. I noticed a almost $13 million increase in overspend in the Human Resources Benefit Fund. Have you determined why workers' comp claims or costs have increased beyond initial estimates? And I don't know if this is a question for personnel or someone can come and speak to that. Is anyone here? Oh, great. And then I'm going to have a question for City Attorney too, so.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Sorry. Paula Days, Personnel Department, supporting workers' compensation. We don't have our chief here this morning, but the claims in workers' comp are unpredictable based on, we have staffing challenges, fewer staffing members, so we have limited ability in some areas to tackle all of the caseload that we have, which may result in some penalties that we have to pay, and then there are unpredictable cases that result in increased costs, and typically the medical costs, the increase in medical costs, naturally, which we don't control, drives some of the increased costs year to year. It's just an unpredictable industry.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So a question for the City Attorney's Office. Can you talk through year-end estimates for liability claims, outside counsel costs, and litigation expenses, and how do these estimates align with the budget we just adopted and those allocations in the 25-26 adopted budget?
Good afternoon, council members. I can speak, Ann Haley, Assistant City Attorney. I can speak only to outside counsel, actually, where we have a few items on later today, as you do know. And we are absolutely not only on the projected year-end budget, but as I'll share with you later, and as you see in our report, we have identified $2 million in savings, actually, in outside counsel contracts. So we'll be asking that that amount be reverted and reappropriated actually to satisfy our needs for the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. Colleagues, do you all have questions? Councilmember Blumenfield and then Councilwoman Hutt.
Sure, and this is just for the group here, not yet for the departments, right? So one thing just to follow up, you mentioned the risk, the $500 billion cuts by the Trump administration, that presents some risk. That's, to me, is a huge red flag, flashing sign, all the rest. Can you delve into that a little bit more in terms of how are we preparing for that inevitable, those inevitable cuts, and where do we expect them to hurt the most?
I'm sure we have, I think, someone from our grants group who is doing the more detailed tracking on the federal budget.
Because it's not just the grants, but I mean, I guess if you're counting CDBG and everything else, but sure. I mean, I just want to make sure we're doing everything we can to be ready.
Hi, good afternoon, Yolanda Chavez with the CAO's office. I think the major risk, it's very hard to be specific. We are tracking cuts to major infrastructure grants, but I think the major risk is really to our formula programs, so CDBG Home, as well as rental assistance, which supports basically our supportive housing units. So we are tracking the status of that, but it's very hard to say what the results, end results of the proposed budget would be at the federal level.
Okay, and then, but they wouldn't kick in right away.
Right. The impact would really be to our 26-27 budget.
Okay. And then, thank you. then that's good to keep in mind that we have a little bit of lead time, but it's still going to hurt. How are we, we're preparing in the budget, we're potentially laying off 600 people, and, where are we on that? Are we on track in terms of the preparations that need to happen with our departments and everything else? Is there something that we need to be doing? Are we going to start seeing those layoffs in the next few months once we hit July, August? And obviously, this is all, ideally, something happens in the outside world that would change that, but just absent a change of our trajectory.
Ben Seha with the CAO. As you may recall, we did leave in 4 months' worth of funding for positions that are filled and slated for elimination. On top of that, the Personnel Department has already initiated the process for identifying, first confirming the work histories of all the city employees. That's been an ongoing process. And also putting together the steps for what's being referred to as a transfer portal, where any individual can in essence raise their hand and say, I'd like the opportunity to transfer to a different department, given the fact that their position may be eliminated. On top of that, one of the instructions in the budget was the suspension of PCH. And so with the suspension of PCH, CEO's office has issued a memo to all departments, what we're referring to as interim procedures for layoff avoidance. So, for example, if a department has a position that is vacant as a management assistant, and they just so happen to have somebody in a management position slated for, displacement, then we're asking the department to, in essence, avoid that layoff by using their vacant position for that layoff avoidance. On top of that, we're authorizing departments to, in some cases, issue substitute authorities for the purpose of layoff avoidance. So one example is if they have a senior MA and they have 2 or management assistants, they could hold that senior MA vacant and use that funding to avoid potentially two layoffs by issuing sub-authorities for those potentially displaced positions. And we're also allowing for the use of in-lieu, the in-lieu procedures to, again, try to stem the possible displacement of individuals. So we think that with the, yes, we have, in the range of 500 to 600 field positions still potentially impacted by layoffs, that with the transfer opportunities, with these new interim procedures for layoff avoidance, that number may come down, what ultimately is impacted by the position cuts.
Right, that's wonderful. And how do we track that? How do we track both, all of the different changes, transfers that you're referring to, as well as the process of sorting out, seniority and all the rest?
Well, I could only speak to the procedures that are handled by the CAO and as a substitute authorities and in lieu's. We will have a number because every substitute authority would need to be added into the Workday system. So we will know how many positions sub-authorities are added for that purpose, and we will be able to also track how the in-lieu's are being used for potential layoff avoidance. As to the transfer opportunities, I think that's going to be something and that possibly the Personnel Department will have to track.
I can speak a little. I can speak a little bit to the transfer process. So communications have already been sent citywide to employees who are in those broad classes to start the expedited transfers to proprietary departments to start relieving the general fund. Personnel will have to keep track of all of those transfers, send notifications to departments, and this is the tentative plan until we have that finalized plan that the general manager can speak with this body about. But departments will be notified. The plan is to have a list of individuals slated for those expedited transfers. And so through that, we'll keep track of everything and all of these moving parts and work closely with the CAO's office as well.
No, that's great. I just would love it if there was a way for us as council to be able to peer into that to some extent and know, okay, we started at 600, we've now done all of these things, we're now down to 400, and then ideally we get all the way down to 0, but that we can somehow track that or be able to peer in on that in real time. And I'm not sure how we do that other than bring it up in these meetings. Thanks.
Councilwoman Hunt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your report, you just kind of talked about wildfires a little bit. So can I ask some questions about FEMA reimbursement? So are we tracking and tabulating FEMA reimbursement from the wildfires? And if so, what's our plan if FEMA doesn't fund any of the reimbursements that we're expecting?
Good afternoon, Patty Huber from the CAO's office. At this time, we are still working with FEMA and Cal OES to finalize our actual damage inventory list against which FEMA would expect us to submit reimbursements. That list has to be finalized by June 16th. We can't submit reimbursement requests until that list is final. At that time, our plan is, and we have already started working with the departments to gather all of the documentation on this, but for what we would call completed work, i.e. our emergency protective measures, we've done all of our response, it's done, the fire is out. So we are going to submit for that, and then as well for our debris removal. Those will be the first things that we submit. The other projects where we're actually having to go in and replace something or rebuild something, those reimbursements would come later as we finish those projects.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all.
Councilwoman Hernandez, you have any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I have one comment and 2 questions, but this is about number 1, not particularly around personnel. Is that okay? Wonderful. So I have a couple of general questions about the FSR and the process because I want to make sure we're getting quality information at each of these reporting moments, especially given the amount of work this committee has put in with support from the departments over the last month to restore services and ensure that as many layoffs as possible were avoided. I want to make sure departments as well as the legislators are being held accountable to constituents for the service delivery we have promised them. And I've heard that there is some issues with getting the appropriate information or high quality data information to make sure that the FSR is put together to the best of our ability so that we have the appropriate information. So I want to learn more. Can you explain to us the process for how the FSR is put together?
Sure thing. Sure thing, Councilmember. Just starting, even just from the whole process, from the beginning of the year, we conduct an annual training. We have a detailed written instructions as to what needs to be submitted, when, and the standards for those submissions. And then during September, November, January, and April, submissions are due from departments to us on the 10th of the month or thereabouts, and then subsequently due to me for final review after our analysts have reviewed them. When departments submit their information, their analysts who are assigned, as well as their chiefs, review that information, and we'll work with the departments to gather more information if there's anything missing within their submission, or if more information is determined to be necessary to refine their projections. And then those submissions come to me for final review, and then they're included in our financial status reports that come to the mayor and council.
Great, thank you. And understandably, there might be different amounts of information provided by different departments due to their size. How do you ensure that information provided answers all the questions you have? Do you have direct contact with the departments after they submit their information? Is there a back and forth that happens? And let's say that you don't get the information that you need, what are the accountability measures? Do you extend the time it takes to get the FSR out? Is there a note in the FSR that says that the data is not to the quality that we need? Just, yeah, I know I gave you more than 2 questions, but
no, all good.
Just
so there is a back and forth that will happen with departments as needed. That can be either over email or over call, so they'll set that up. Depends on the situation, the specific set of questions. We don't have notes for that. When we don't get the information that we need or that we would want to refine our projections, we use the information that we do have to then make our best projection based on the information we have available, which is largely within our financial management system, both current year and prior year data, as well as information we may already have about policy or other decisions made related to the department that may be relevant to that set of projection.
Great, thank you. And let's say, so you don't put any notes into the FSR if you don't get the information. Have there been moments in the past where you don't get the information you need that makes the FSR a less viable or less impactful document for us?
So on that note, I would say no. I think we do a fairly good job of making sure that at the macro level, you're getting the information you need to know about the state of the city's finances at that moment in time. The FSR is kind of a moment in time view of where the city stands. That's what we issue for them during the year, because obviously things change as we go along. As we get more information from revenue, that's why like the second FSR, which usually comes around December before we get some of the property tax revenue, is more of what we call a transactional FSR. We will provide you with kind of an overview of where the city stands, but really that FSR is more to take care of transactions that departments are expecting, because the FSR is a vehicle for many departments to kind of right-size their accounts as they go along during the year. Otherwise, you would be getting inundated by requests for motions to transfer money from a salary account to an overtime account, et cetera. So that's what the FSR allows for, is for the transactions to occur to make sure the department's accounts are being right-sized as they go along. If we don't get the information from a department requesting a transaction, sometimes those transactions won't come in because we just didn't get the information to validate that that transaction is actually warranted, and B, that we have the information to answer your questions when asked, why is this transaction taking place? So there are times where we will say, no, we don't have the right or can't validate this information, and so that specific transaction won't make it in. And that's why it's really important for our analysts to have that working relationship with the departments to make sure that they get the information they need to then, make its way into the FSR.
Great, thank you. And I know in this one, in this FSR, it's identified that we have a $108 million gap to close, or overspending essentially. Is that, I know that doesn't happen every year because we don't have these catastrophic events every year, but wouldn't the FSR help prevent some of that from happening in future years? And I know you said macro, but in this budget cycle, we were talking so much micro, literally talking $1 million here, $1 million there. Because next year we've been advised that it's not going to be a better budget. And so the macro and the micro is going to be incredibly important, I think, even to assess as we move forward.
Right, and what I meant is that the the summary pages is really the macro level, and then as you get into each department and each individual transaction being requested, that is at the micro level, and all the attachments really do point to a micro level review of the budget. To your general question, I think the FSR is definitely very useful because it really, and it's not just used by the city, but it's actually also something that we get, that we share with the rating agencies and we go over with the rating agencies, because it is really the only document that tracks the city kind of as we go along. Typically, I tell the rating agencies and others that the budget is only balanced twice a year, and that's on July 1st and on June 30th. Everything in between it's up and down, and so the FSR provides that vehicle to let people know how we stand. Maybe not to the dollar, to the cent, but in general terms, how we're doing, especially if we we like to call headwinds. If we see a lot of headwinds coming our way with regard to at the national level, at the state level, or even things internally here like the disasters we've had in recent memory. So it definitely is a guiding tool that we use for the year, and then it's used again by the council and the mayor as they're preparing the budget. This year, for example, we used the mid-year FSR to enact a lot of austerity measures within departments to make sure that we took care of kind of this year's budget within the fiscal year and not push off the problems we were having in the current fiscal year to be dealt with next year. And by that I mean, we were trying to limit the use of the reserve fund to close our gap so that the reserve fund would be in a good position starting next year. So that's one example of how we are using the current year FSRs to also prepare for the following fiscal year.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen.
Councilmember Blumenfield?
Yeah, speaking at the micro level, just wanted to, I think there may be a technical issue, but on page 70, the fire department, the FSR states that it reappropriates amounts from the Innovation Fund under Council File 25374, which is for digitization and electronic payment pilot, and similarly for the medical supply inventory management. But those items are actually pending in this committee, and the initial appropriation has not been approved. Now, you know, I'd love to see them approved, and if the rest of the council agrees, to have the amounts reappropriated in fiscal year 25-26, but do we need to change the FSR recommendations, including the list in attachment 10? It was never actually approved by the council, just by a committee.
Those could, it really depends on when, if it's still under consideration, it could be a good idea to then remove those and then do the reappropriation at the time that is approved. The only issue with, that's just adding additional amendment, I guess, on both sides, both to this report and to those separate council reports. Otherwise, if they are approved, then this reappropriation would work perfectly fine, these recommendations. If they are not, then those funds would stay within the Innovation Fund, and they wouldn't be reappropriated.
So we can leave it the way it is now, you're saying, even though it didn't, you can reappropriate it? I just didn't know that you could do that, even though it wasn't ever appropriated in the first place?
Those reappropriations will not go forward in front of council until July. So those will go forward just after July 1st as part of that recommendation 37, as they have to happen next year to actually effectuate that reappropriation. So
Okay.
there is still, I guess, a gap in time between when council would consider those reports and when these recommendations related to reappropriations would go forward.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure if it was done, if there needed to be a tweak to the language, but that's fine, thank you.
Okay, colleagues, any more questions, comments? Okay, I move that we adopt this item as amended. Madam Clerk, would you please
Wait,
call?
are we gonna, I was gonna bring up BOE?
Oh,
but-
sure, yeah.
Okay, I wasn't doing that because I thought we were just doing these.
Oh, no, whoever you want to bring up.
Oh, okay, yeah, so I'd like to bring up BOE, sorry, separate issue, and call them special. So we can bring up BOE, and colleagues, the reason I called this special, in part to make sure the public and my colleagues are aware that these budgetary items, you know, have a really devastating impact on our climate policy, and essentially that they end projects across the city, including in my district and all of our districts. And this isn't just about the 50 million, which last year I worked very hard to put into this budget for decarb and was completely cut, but we went further. During the budget committee discussions, this committee, we defunded the majority of our climate work, in part because it appears, I think, that we don't necessarily always focus on what this money is actually doing, so I wanted to take a moment to be really clear about it. Just as cuts to ADA implementation costs our city more in the long run, we're going to pay more over time the longer we wait to eliminate fossil fuels and bring on renewable energy assets. I want to explain, I mean, what is GHG elimination exactly? What is the decarbonization project? You know, which are things that have been dramatically cut. Well, these are things like a full building decarbonization project eliminates on-site greenhouse gas forever, including ratepayer-funded bills that we pay each and every month. It provides resilience to city facilities, especially in cooling centers, as it reduces our electricity bills to down near zero or to zero. In fact, the fact that we're going to buy equipment anyway, and what our budget does and what the action today does means we're shorting our own goals to replace gas equipment with green counterparts, which would ultimately maximize DWP incentives, would prevent us from leveraging a tremendous amount of money. Now, BOE completed the decarbonization work plan report and the year one project workbook, and that workbook, which this action basically defunds, essentially, had included a set of 47 electrification projects and 9 solar projects, 56, with an estimated budget of $61 million. And these were projects in each and every one of our districts. Council District 1, there were 4 projects. My district, there were 6. District 5, there were 3. District 10, there were 3. District 15, there were 6. And according to BOE, the estimated savings, rebates, and labor impacts from these projects in 1 year included $1 million annually in utility cost savings, 1.5 in DWP rebates, 350 jobs would have been created, a lot of things. I wanted to ask the Bureau to come to the table to explain a little bit about what I'm saying, and to, I also wanted to put it out there that I'm not just complaining about it, although I am complaining about it, but I also want to announce that I'm working closely with the mayor's office, following up on the budget instruction that I put forward to direct DWP and the city to focus on renewable energy across major customers for the sole purpose of grid resiliency and effectuating the very plan that we are pausing today. So the question, that's a long buildup, but I wanted to be clear about it. The question to you all is, given the current city budget eliminates funding for the municipal building decarbonization work plan, which was supposed to help our city transition nearly 1,000 municipal buildings off fossil fuels in order to remove GHG, place solar assets such as solar and batteries to reduce our bills. Can you explain briefly what is the decarbonization work plan and workbook, what it is, and what are the consequences of these cuts to our LA 100 and our AQMD obligations? And then, how will what we're doing moving forward help us get back on path?
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Zora Akhtar with the
Can you
Bureau of
please
Engineering.
bring that a little bit closer? You gotta get really close to it. Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Zora Akhtar, Chief Sustainability Officer for the Bureau of Engineering. The Municipal Existing Building Decarbonization Work Plan Report is a multi-year master plan that provides the city with a strategic framework and detailed roadmap to eliminate operational greenhouse gas emissions from city's 980 existing municipal buildings, nearly 1,000 existing municipal buildings, through the implementation of measures including energy efficiency, electrification, solar panels, and battery energy storage. The work plan report is complete. This plan keeps the city on track with meeting the South Coast Air Quality Management District's air quality rule, which the city is required to meet starting 2026. It aligns with LA 100 goals and the larger greenhouse gas emission reduction targets set by the city and state. The program goals include reducing greenhouse gas emission, reducing ongoing operations and maintenance costs, reduce costs by strategically timing investment into building efficiency and equipment upgrades as part of larger rehabilitation and/or equipment replacement projects. It improves resiliency of city facilities such as cooling centers needed during emergencies. The council member highlighted many of the program's projected benefits. The decarbonization is an active program with 3 projects in construction that remain funded and will continue. The pace of decarbonization investment can be adjusted to reflect council priorities. BOE developed the Year 1 workbook reflecting the level of funding and that council previously provided. We will need to revisit that pace of work based on the new budget. The Bureau of Engineering appreciates all that the committee did to make difficult choices in this tough budget year. We look forward to working with the Energy and Environment Committee to determine the path forward for this program.
Thank you.
Okay. Colleagues, any other questions for other departments or this one? All right. Thank you so much. I understand that there is one additional late technical amendment that I'm going to ask the clerk to read now.
Yes, thank you. There's an additional amendment. It is to amend this item to transfer $52,500 from the General City Purposes Fund number 156, account number 00A28, Council Projects, to the Police Department Fund number 170, account number 001092, overtime sworn for additional enforcement of parties and noise complaints in the Hollywood Hills area in 2025-26.
Okay. Colleagues, without objection, I move that we adopt this item as amended. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yaroslavsky,
Yes.
Blumenfield,
Aye.
Hutt,
Yes.
McCosker absent, Hernandez. Yes. 4 ayes, this item is approved as amended.
Okay, great, thank you. We're going to move now to item 22. Mr. Wexler, would you please read the item?
Item 22, City Attorney reports relative to draft ordinances amending the Los Angeles Administrative Code to establish the Mobility Investment Fund and repeal other sections, and amending the Los Angeles Municipal Code to add and adjust transportation demand management fees and other related assessment and permit fees paid to the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. The item is referred to Budget and Finance, Planning and Land Use Management, and the Transportation Committees.
Okay, great. I have, we're going to do a little overview of this with DOT. So if DOT could please come to the table. So colleagues, this has to do with TDM fees. Welcome. Could you just give us, introduce yourself, please, and then give a very brief overview of what the ordinances are? And then I have a couple questions.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay, great. Hello, council members. My name is Rubina Ghazarian. I'm with LADOT's Planning and Policy Division. I'm joined by colleagues from LADOT. Today, we're here to describe 2 ordinances that accompany the TDM ordinance. The TDM ordinance is not before you today. What is before you is the Mobility Investment Trust Fund, as well as the development review fees. So just as very quick background on these 2 ordinances. 1 second. I'll start with the fee ordinance, which was before this committee about approximately 2 months ago. The fee ordinance this is the way LADOT assesses fees to capture staff time in reviewing land use and transportation projects that require review by LADOT's development and review teams. LADOT development review staff assess project applications to assess how a project impacts the transportation network and meets transportation-related requirements per the city's guidelines and standards. These fees were last updated in 2014 and need to be updated to reflect current staff wages and capture new review services that were not part of the last update. The 2014 update included fees for studies based on old CEQA guidelines under LOS, while the new fees would include the review of current VMT-based studies. These fee updates were estimated based on actual average process times for each service and anticipated process times for the future TDM services. The CAO's office reviewed LADOT's proposed fees and issued a report to the Budget and Finance Committee in November 2022 that stated this office finds that the new and revised development and review fees in the draft development and review fee ordinance reflect full cost recovery of LADOT costs to perform developer TDM review services reflected in the revised TDM ordinance and detailed in the LADOT report and its attachments. LADOT will also conduct an annual review of the fees. The fees shall be revised by the department to account for any staff salary cost of living adjustment. And I can give a brief background on the second ordinance that's before you as well, which is the Mobility Investment Trust Fund Ordinance. LADOT has several trust funds today that fund the development of infrastructure and programs for transportation. These include the Bicycle Plan Trust Fund, which collects developer contributions for bicycle infrastructure like protected and striped bicycle lanes, the Neighborhood Traffic Management Trust Fund, which collects developer contributions to design and implement neighborhood traffic management interventions, and the ATSAC Trust Fund, which collects developer contributions to design and implement ATSAC infrastructure such as signals, cameras, and detection loops. This action before you would create a new Mobility Investment Trust Fund, which would consolidate these 3 funds. Specifically, it would be the action before you would repeal the Bicycle Plan Trust Fund and Neighborhood Traffic Management Trust Fund, and move the remaining funds from all three funds into the new trust fund. These one-time payments into the trust fund are similar to other existing funds that collect transportation impact fees from developers in the city. In the case of the TDM program, developers choose to pay into the Mobility Investment Trust Fund, so these voluntary contributions would not be subject to the California Mitigation Fee Act requirements. So in summary, the current trust funds have limits on the type of improvements they can fund. They're focused modally rather than holistically on supporting the user experience in the public right-of-way. So the proposed consolidation of trust funds better aligns voluntary developer contributions with complete street transportation improvements and programs, which would support the vision of the Mobility Plan 2035 and policy goals, including the reduction of drive-alone trips and greenhouse gas emissions. This would also advance the implementation of the forthcoming TDM ordinance. So if approved today, the fee ordinance and trust fund ordinances will go to full city council for final adoption. The fee ordinance is required to be publicly noticed before final adoption, and the new transportation review fees, as well as the trust fund ordinance, would be operative after adoption. The TDM ordinance is currently under review by the city attorneys for form and legality and will be before you, we anticipate, in the coming months. We look forward to those next steps and the anticipated future adoption of the program that could advance our mobility plan goals and increase cost recovery for vital transportation review services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a few questions. Does DOT or CAO have an estimate on how much revenue these new or increased fees were going to generate annually?
So we haven't necessarily done projections looking forward, but we have looked into the past to assess actual projects that we've reviewed. We, for the fees, we're both increasing existing services to reflect actual time and costs and introducing new fees. So looking at some of the existing services, we did calculate a 3-year period from 2022 to 2024 and estimated that there would be approximately $350,000 to $380,000 that we could have recovered during that time period if the new fees were adopted. It would likely be higher than that, considering this is just a subset of the services that LADOT would provide.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about some of the things that these funds could be used for. How are decisions made on what the funds are used for? And so is that something that the council office weighs in on? Is that a DOT or developer directive? How does that work?
So first and foremost, the use of the fees would have to be in alignment with the purposes of the TDM ordinance, which specifies kind of the policy goals of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, reduction of single occupancy vehicle trips, and VMT. So there's a policy alignment nexus there, but that, per the ordinance, that would be a general manager discretion of LADOT or their designee. There typically is also sometimes geographic limits depending on where the fees originated. But we do this today for a variety of different trust funds or developer fees, so it would be a similar process for the future.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple more questions. I know there's pending legislation in Sacramento that would, to a large degree, reduce the types of projects that are subject to CEQA because they're infill development projects. Do you see that potential legislation, which sounds like it's going to sail through and get signed by the governor, impacting the type of work you do and whether or not these fees will continue to be something you can assess if these become by right projects? How are you thinking about what's happening in Sacramento as this is coming down the pike?
We're looking at those potential changes, but we're looking at this fee recovery process as one that's essential regardless of kind of the streamlining legislation that may pass at the state level, because we need to be accounting for actual review times as well as just accounting for the more types of development review processes than we do today. So
it seems like streamlining, though, may obviate your jurisdiction to oversee and review these projects. Is that accurate? I mean, maybe you're still trying to figure it out, but if it's exempt from CEQA, because CEQA is now, not applying, to what extent do we still have the discretion to impose these kinds of fees?
The fees would apply to a variety of different services, so even ministerial efforts, and our development review lead, Robert, is here if he would like to add more, but we have services like driveway approvals, building permits, and all of these, regardless of whether they're discretionary or not, would continue to come to LADOT. Our transportation analysis service would be only for discretionary projects subject to CEQA. I don't know if there's...
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. It would still apply for some projects, even if they don't have any VMT review or other CEQA related. Some of them are more localized to the development, access points, changes to infrastructure, things of that nature. So they would still apply regardless.
Okay. So I'm going to stop there. Colleagues, questions? Comments? Okay. I move, thank you very much, I appreciate it. I move approval of this item. Ms. Morales, would you please call the roll?
Yaroslavsky,
Yes.
Blumenfield,
Aye.
Hutt,
Yes.
McCosker absent, Hernandez.
Yes.
4 ayes, this item is approved.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. We've concluded all of our open session items, so we're going to go ahead and prepare the room for closed session. Take just a minute to do that. Madam Clerk, is there anything to report from closed session?
Nothing on the closed session items to
Okay.
report?
Okay.
So we could just
We
take the
could
vote
take
on
up
items
24, 25, and 26?
Yes.
Which are all contracts that require approval in open session. I recommend approval of these 3 items. Colleagues, questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Yaroslavsky?
Yes.
Blumenfield?
Aye.
Hutt?
Yes.
McCosker absent. Hernandez? Yes. 4 ayes. These 3 items are approved.
Okay, great. Are there any other items on the desk?
The desk is clear.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. That concludes our agenda. With that, have a good evening, everyone. Thank you so much.